In this lesson, we will look at an example of how to compute an employee's gross earnings. We are to assume that time and a half is paid for any time worked in excess of a 40-hour work week. So in this example, we see that the employee has worked a total of 67 hours. And since we are to assume that time and a half is paid for any time worked in excess of a 40-hour work week, we're going to assume, or we can determine in fact, that the employee must have earned a total of 27 hours worth of overtime. And we can see that merely by taking the total hours worked, which is 67, and subtracting 40 from that, and we see that we get 27 hours rather. Now, the next bit of work I want to do is to compute the overtime rate. And in this case, we can see that the overtime rate is found by taking 1.5 times the regular rate of $8.80 per hour. So when we multiply 1.5 times 8.8, we get $13.20 per hour. So this is in fact the overtime rate. Alright, well let's now compute the regular earnings. The way we would get the regular earnings is by taking the regular rate of $8.80 and we would multiply that by 40 hours worked at the regular rate, and when we carry out the multiplication we see that the regular earnings are $528. Next, let's compute the overtime earnings. And I'll abbreviate overtime as O.T. or OT. And we may get the overtime earnings by taking the overtime rate, which is $13.20 per hour, and we'll multiply that by 27 hours worth of overtime, and we see that we end up with $356.40 as the overtime earnings. Our total earnings then would merely be the sum of the regular earnings and the overtime earnings. So we take $528 and we're going to add $356.40, and when we do that, we see that the total earnings are $884.40.